And today we're at DIA in Al Barsha, and I'm here with Lara Hudson, who's joining us on Let Them Fly. We're going to explore the journey of education, starting right at the beginning. The hardest decision for a parent that you ever have to make is putting your child in their very first school. I think not only the child breaks their heart, but I think parents break their heart in a far bigger way. And I'm going to turn to Lara, because she deals with the parents and the children on that very first day of school. Tell me, am I right? Is that the hardest decision anyone makes?
I think, yes, I think it's a huge decision for families. It's a very personalised decision. And usually on the first day of term, there is a lot of explaining to parents that everything really will be okay, comforting parents, explaining what's actually going to go on the first day. And obviously building up to that, we spend a lot of time through July and August making sure we share lots of information, and making sure that everybody's ready. But it still comes as a really big shock when you arrive on that first day, you hand over your little one, and some of our nurseries take children from 45 days. So some of them can be tiny, tiny babies, and you hand them to somebody who you've perhaps met a couple of times before. But it's still a very strange thing that we do within our societies, I suppose.
I think that's so hard. And I think because maternity is so short here, that must be horrendous. I mean, I have to say, I've got 4 children. The first 2, I couldn't wait to put into school. For me, I was dancing down the path. The last one, when I put it there, I broke my heart. I cried all day. And she came out and she was fine. It was me that wasn't. But Lara, tell me a bit about your background. You have been with nurseries since forever. Since I first met you, you were running a nursery. You are probably the Miss Nursery of Dubai. Is that right?
Yeah, and I like to see myself as an early years anorak, so early years through and through. I've been in the UAE now for 20 years, and I've always been doing kind of education in different forms, but early years I think is where it really starts, where it matters. And there's a huge emphasis on our teams to make sure we get this experience right for children, because we set the scene for whatever comes next. So when I first arrived in Dubai, I was really privileged. I came and I worked in a private school here. I taught 50 children a day, 25 in the morning, and then we swapped, and I taught another 25 as my class went off to an Arabic teacher for their sessions. And then I moved into early years and I became a director of a nursery school. I was then really privileged. I moved into teacher training, which I think is another perspective, and it really does enable you to see a wide variety of different teaching styles. Looking at different kinds of settings. We worked across curriculums, which was always really interesting. Then I went back into nurseries, and I've kind of stayed back in nurseries, and I'm now the director for early years for Innoventures Education. So get to see children every day, but also this has been quite nice because I've actually been able to see the transitions and how that works into schools as well. And I think that's been a real value add for me because I hadn't had that experience before.
Well, I know a few months ago, I think it was now, and I came down and saw your little nursery down sort of Meadows Nursery, and I have to say I was in love. It was it was so beautifully done. It was very natural, lots of wood and lots of outside space, and it kind of revolutionised my idea and my memory of nurseries. And I think the transition and the change, probably my kids were there 20 years ago, and the change is so dynamic and so diverse. And I know you've been driving that change.
I think there has been a huge shift in the UAE especially, and we now have incredible quality into our early years settings, and I think that has been a real shift. I think it's come from the change in the government kind of moving under the KHDA. That's been huge for us to be recognised as educators. And then there's been a lot more research done into the early years internationally that we can then bring in. And there's lots of best practice that we're now seeing across the board within the settings. Like you say, back to the kind of calmness, the neutrality, making sure that actually what the children do every day is what shouts rather than the toys and the paintings and the walls and murals. And that's now been very well integrated and established into our setting.
So can you explain for parents listening in, what is early years? Just kind of give an overview of early years. I know, the difference between nursery and the difference between Foundation 1. Just tell us a bit about it.
So for me, early years is just the best. So it takes us from birth right the way up to usually 5 years of age, because that's usually where we would say that we then hand them off into primary education. And it's about setting the tone for those children. We have lots of curriculums that are currently being covered in Dubai, from the early years foundation stage through to Reggio Emilia, Montessori settings. We now have some high scope. I think we actually have our first IB nursery as well that's here. So from that perspective, there is a huge amount of research that I think parents now have to do to make sure they get the right choice, and that adds to the pressure. So not only are you dropping off your most important possession in the world, you then have to make a choice between, the locations and the curriculums and the timings and the days, and it all adds pressure to parents, but that's what we're there for.
So if I have to drop my baby in 45 days and I have to say, I don't know how people do it, that's basically a baby care service. Are they doing any learning, or are they doing any kind of excites, or I don't know, motivation, anything for them?
Yep. So in our settings, particularly, we believe that children learn from birth. So we have clear planning in place. In those younger years, up until about 2, we very much focus on what we call the prime areas of development. So that would be your physical, your communication, and then also making that personal, social, emotional side of things and making sure they're there. So that's where we really focus. We do lots and lots of tummy time activities, lots of movement activities so that children are ready to write, because ultimately your early movement impacts your writing abilities. And we do a lot around the social emotional side, so getting children ready to interact with other children, and obviously everything is very play-based because we know that that's how children really learn.
I really liked when I walked around your nursery, there was that element of choice. So there wasn't a prescriptive, you must sit down and write. It was when you went to write, they could then enjoy writing, and I thought that was a really lovely way of introducing children to enjoying writing.
Yeah, so choice, again, is a huge part of it, making sure that children can access resources. Often when we plan things, children don't follow as we would expect. So we make sure that there is the room and the flexibility for them to take learning wherever they want to go. We know now that learning has to matter to those children. It has to be something that they can understand. So making things real for them, and making sure that they do have the ability to make free choice. Because so often we see children who can't make decisions, and that comes from the fact that they didn't have the opportunities early on to learn how to do that.
Can I use that now as an adult? Can I use that? It was from when I was in nursery.
Yeah, it was from when you were young.
So in terms of, as a parent, what would be the optimal way of putting your child into school? What's the optimal age from your research and your experience?
There isn't really an optimal age as such, purely and simply because every child is so different and every family's needs are different. And you can sometimes see children who are really into everything, and they're desperate to come into nursery because they're desperate to be kept busy. But we can make these kind of different situations, different ages work in different ways. The youngsters, the babies, when they come in, they tend to settle much more quickly. They tend to transition in a lot quicker. And it's really then just a case of making sure that they're very familiar with the people that they're with, and that they have really good consistency in those classrooms. There's good routines that are established, and a lot of the routine is based on what families want from home. So we talk to parents about when they want their children to sleep and when they feed and things, so that we continue what's been going on as a good routine at home. As they get a little bit older, they become a bit more aware of where they are and the changes that they're going through. And then we tend to make the transition period kind of a negotiation between us and the parents, working out what would work for both sides. We usually build children up. So we ask them to come in for an hour perhaps, and then they go home, so they know that they are going home. And then we build it up to an hour and a half and slowly come to full-time attendance. And we also use things like transitional objects. So if they have a teddy that's a favourite teddy bear, or some children have blankets and things, we will then ask them to come in with those, and slowly we will work with them in that way. But usually it really is a good communication with parents, that good relationship being formed from very early on, and making sure that we have that open discussion about what's working for both parties.
So is it from a parent's point of view, what's the age they have to be in school now? So they have to, do they have there is a national age? No.
Well, there isn't really for early years. Schooling is formal. So that's when they would normally start. But we see huge benefits to children coming in, particularly on the social emotional sides, when they start early years. And usually we tend to see children entering around 2.
Oh gosh, that's quite early. So they would start FS1 at 4 or 3?
They start FS1 at 3.
Okay.
And then move into FS2 at 4 reception, depending on the term.
So obviously if they can do part-time, so they could come a few days a week. Is that better for them to come a few days a week, or is it better for them to be in a week at a time? What's less disrupting for them?
Again, it depends on the child. So we tend to find that children that come more days settle quicker, because they have fewer days where there's their gaps. But what we also see is that the part-time attendance, once they've built up, again, has benefits if you have parents who are at home and want to spend time with those children. There's benefits to both versions.
Is there any research that shows children that are in early years and then progress through school, they do academically better? Is there any research to support sending?
I think a lot of it would be anecdotal, to be honest. But I mean, what we're seeing is a bigger pressure at the moment, particularly in countries where the economic drive is there for them to come in earlier and earlier.
Yeah, I get that. And I know you were very involved originally in Scandinavian type education, and they go to school when they're 6, is that right?
They actually start when they're 7.
Oh gosh.
So it's a little bit later, and they don't do any reading or writing until they actually start their formal schooling. So the early years is all about play, and there is some huge kind of depth and research that shows that's really, really beneficial.
Yeah, I know you were very, when I spoke to you years ago, I remember you being very excited about the system. And I have to say, I love that idea, because I do feel there's a lot of pressure and children develop very much at a different rate, and no child is the same. So, my 3-year-old can run and walk and do whatever. And the other one got to 3 and not interested. I'm not playing. I don't want to write. I don't want to. And I think we put a lot of pressure on children to hit these milestones at a particular age, and they may not be ready.
I think a much more important thing to focus on is actually those social emotional skills. So we can have children that can come in and can do their ABCs, but actually they can't interact with somebody, and they can't perhaps share in the same way, or simply know how to play, my turn, your turn. That has a much more beneficial, lifelong kind of learning impact than any of the academics.
And we had this conversation before about children come in and they know ABCD, and they can recite it perfectly, but they don't actually know what it means. And they certainly don't know the sound. They only know the name of the words. And I'm guessing you had a lot of children through who are very intelligent because they know all of their letters, but actually the reality is you're having to go back to basics. Is that correct?
Very much so, because knowing the letter names doesn't allow you to read with them. You can't do the blending and those kind of skills. So often parents will come in and say, you're going to teach my children ABC 1, 2, 3. And actually, that's not really what those children need. They actually need to know the phonic sounds. They need to be able to know what I call the numberness of number. So what does 2 look like? What does 3 look like in terms of quantity, and being able to kind of allocate those things. So I think those skills are much more important. And actually being able to interact and communicate your needs and your wishes and understand your emotions and label your emotions, those things need to come way earlier than they perhaps are in some education. I think the curriculum's messed up. I think we're putting a lot of pressure on education results driven academic results and far less on emotional. And I kind of, I watch children these days, and I do think there is a time to rebalance and refocus on that. Tell me all about Innoventures, because we've talked a bit about education. Tell me about Innoventures and Innoventures nursery and early years. Tell me a bit more about that. So we currently have 7 nurseries or early childhood centres and 5 schools. Our nursery schools or our early childhood centres all cover the early years foundation stage curriculum, which is a really good broad-based holistic curriculum for young children who perhaps are looking to move into any other curriculum.
And that's primary education, English.
It's taught in English, but we also offer Arabic sessions as well, because I think having my own children here, it's so important that they do learn Arabic and that they have a love for Arabic earlier on. I have 2 children, one who really didn't enjoy Arabic and the other one who flourished, and that real flourishing kind of love of Arabic did come from her earlier interactions with it as a language. But we offer Arabic. We have 5 schools that cover 3 curriculums. So we offer American, British and the International Baccalaureate curriculum. And our children go from our nurseries or early childhood centres and feed directly into the schools. And it seems to be quite a seamless transition, because when we teach the early years foundation stage and the different elements of it, we always make sure we put a bit of an international spin on it. So, one of the things that always kind of upset me was when you would look at teaching and you'd talk about wiggly worms, and some of the children here have never seen a wiggly worm. So it doesn't have any real sentiment to what it is. So we very much focus, and our themes around our learning are very focused on the UAE. And things that they would find here.
And I think that's really lovely, and you're absolutely right, because I know when my eldest he did his early years in the UK, and he drew a house with a sort of normal pointed roof, and my youngest was educated here in Thailand. She drew a house with a flat roof, and it is very much that. I think there's a lovely story. I can't remember her name now. There's a famous writer who wrote an article. It was called "The Danger of a Single Story," and she talked very much about the fact that in Africa, they're growing up in this world where children and all the dolls have got blonde hair, and all the heroes in storybooks have got blonde hair. And she said it was really tough because there was no similarity and there was no heroine to kind of associate with, and that was just Adichie. I can't remember her name is, and gosh, that's horrible, isn't it? Anyway. It really struck me that we perhaps don't always give children the familiarity of their surrounds when we do teach them.
Yeah, I think it's really important that they learn about the things that are going to directly impact them or be familiar around them. So even down to things like when we celebrate National Day, we always make sure that we have usually a picnic of local foods that come in and the children get to try things, because I think it's part of the world that they directly live in, and they need to be able to interact with it seamlessly.
And can I be really politically incorrect? And I'm going to put you on the spot a bit. What is your favourite nursery? Which of your nurseries look after?
I can't tell me that. And we've worked really, really hard over the last year to make sure that consistently they have very similar elements. I think when you have a group of nurseries, you can have slightly different identity because obviously the leadership in them is slightly different. But parents' expectations when you have a group is that you could go between them, and you would notice very few differences and changes. And sometimes explaining that to the leadership can be tough because they have their own ideas of where they want to go with things. But certainly my take on it has always been that if you have a group, it needs to have some consistency there. So hopefully you walk into one of the... It should be that you walk into them and know instantly that they're part of the Raffles brand. And I would hope, maybe we'll test you, I would hope you'd walk into them and feel that way.
Brilliant. And in terms of nursery, any exciting plans ahead? Anything that's happening now?
Over the next year, we are looking to develop the curriculum more. The curriculum is the next area of focus for us, and make sure that we are reading the research and making sure that what we're doing is actually reflecting current best practices. One of the only things you can guarantee in education is the way that it changes, and making sure that we have reflected that in what we're doing, and that our team are up to date and current with their kind of continuous professional development, so that actually what they're rolling out to children is the very best. And that for me is everything. We should be at the top of our game.
So in terms of when you put your child into early years, what can you expect when they come home each day? So, for instance, we'll take 2 years an optimal age. What can you expect? What's the output of putting them in? Because it's quite expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, early years can be, but I think usually with a 2-year-old, you won't get much out of them. So for that end, we actually have a really good communication app that we have that goes out to all parents. It looks just like Facebook on a phone. It's really convenient for parents. And we spend a lot of time sharing with them what the children get up to every day. And that could be a photo of a piece of artwork, an activity, something they've said. And then the hope is that parents will sit down with their children and perhaps go through some of those photos and bits, and it will trigger discussion, because usually 2-year-olds come home and they don't have a huge amount to tell you about their day because they've lived it and it was there in the moment that they were living it. So telling after the fact is always a bit of a challenge. But yes, hopefully the communication app helps with that, because you can go through and look at the piece of artwork and say, oh, did you do this today? What were you doing? And hopefully that will be a conversation.
I think there's parents on here will be thinking, can we have that for our 16-year-olds? Because my 6-year-olds used to come home and go, what have you done? I say, what have you done? And they go, nothing. Yeah. You mean you've sat in school all day and done nothing? Yeah, nothing. Did you speak to anyone? No. And I think we need that going right the way through school.
Yeah, I think it's good. But I mean, one of the things that has always been something that I've been thinking about is when we were at school, we never had those kind of apps. And I think sometimes parents expect us to be on that app all the time, and trying to explain to the teaching team and to parents that needs to be kind of a summative thing. So while we take photos throughout the day, and they do get sent real time so that parents are seeing things throughout the day, and that's really important when a child's transitioning in and settling. That conversation, that dialogue is going to happen once the children go home, because really we want those teachers in the classroom interacting and being live with those children all the time, rather than being on an app.
And I mean, I always think, from my point of view, when we deal with little kids, I always think, the kids that have been in nursery, have been in the sort of foundation years, when you give them an instruction, they're very much easier at following instructions. They seem to learn that processing skill a lot easier, which means that when they go to Foundation 1 and they're told we have to sit down, that instruction is a natural reaction to them, as opposed to something that's completely new.
And also being able to play and interact with their surroundings and follow those instructions, as you say, sitting down, but also understanding that once activities are set up, how you're supposed to go and distribute yourself throughout the classroom and all of those things. Making choices, again, is something that's really, really good. And you see a real difference between children that have been in nursery and those that haven't, in terms of actually being able to go and do what they're being asked and interact with that space quite well.
Yeah, I think, and I think from mum's point of view, it actually gives a bit of freedom, and they can enjoy their children in the evening, as opposed to having to kind of tolerate them all day to some extent.
I think as well, when children have been in nursery for a while, and I usually say this to parents, once they've been in for a couple of weeks, if you're on a part-time attendance, you're likely to go up to a full-time attendance, purely and simply because the children then get very bored at home, because they're so used to activity after activity after activity, and the options being available for them to go and choose what they want to do. When they come home, they're often kind of looking around like, where are the next set of activities coming from? And that can be a challenge.
I remember we were talking before, you had all kinds of exciting activities that they could do. Tell me a bit about the activities they can do when they're with you.
So it depends on the topics and themes that we're following, but usually within a classroom we have something out called continuous provision, which means that the children have a range of tabletop or tough tray activities, so they can go and choose what they want to interact with. And the activities that go out are usually looking to cover holistic learning objectives. We call them learning opportunities, and the children can go and choose what they want to take part in. Something parents often ask is, what if my child goes and sits with the cars every day? We will then either use the cars as a vehicle for learning and change the activity up so that it has a different perspective, or we might then try and target your child and move them on to different things. But within the room, we'll usually have some messy play, which is usually hugely popular with the children. So it could be that we have gloop or different things. We might hide letters in it so that they can go and look for the different letter sounds. We'll do things like listening walks, where we go outside and listen for those sounds. Are they at the beginning, the middle, or the end of what we're hearing? We also will have usually some construction areas. Within that, we'll usually have some kind of mathematical activity. But again, it's down to the free choice of the children, and they'll be changed based on the interests and perhaps the needs that we're seeing as we're observing and then assessing and planning for next steps.
And the last question I've actually got for you is that obviously we're very international and you've got lots of different languages going on in the nursery. Do languages matter when they're little?
I think so, and I think making sure that they're in a language-rich environment, depending on which language you're looking at, is really, really an important focus. We often say children are like sponges and they soak everything up. Parents sometimes come to me and say, my child isn't talking. But when you actually look at the languages that they're talking, they'll talk the same number of words as a child that only has one language, but it'll just be sprinkled across the different languages. So I think they are hugely important. Certainly as they move into our schools, we have a lot of mother tongue programs. It's something that's really important, that international perspective to us as part of Innoventures. But I think at home, it's really important that you maintain your home languages and then go from there, with obviously English being the main language of education here.
Yes, it is. And I think that almost I'm sad about that in many ways. I thought it's great. I mean, it's great for the expats that are moving around, but I do feel that Arabic is getting a little lost in that whole, but that's a whole different conversation. We don't need to have that. Lara, thank you so much for spending time with us. And for helping us understand a little bit about, putting your child into nurseries. It's not a bad thing. It's a very positive thing. And it's allowing them to learn things they won't learn in the home, from choices, from experiences, from meeting friends, from social interaction. It's something that is really vital for every child. Now, if they want to get in touch with you, we're going to obviously link you in, but it's not you, you have other people that do this.
We have a team for admissions, and we have managers in the different locations who would welcome people in to come and have a look around the different branches and ask any questions that they have. I would also say, though, that going to nursery is really good for a parent because you get to meet other parents, and sometimes being a parent can be very lonely. And within what we do as part of a community side of things, we do make sure there are opportunities for parents to come in and network to make sure that everybody gets the support they need, because it's really hard when you come overseas and you don't have that level of support.
Yeah, it is lonely, you're right, and actually gets you the social and being at the same stage, and you've got parent meetups. Yeah, I think that's a really...
just a casual coffee when you need somebody to talk to is good.
Yes, I know my best friend I met out here, I met her because I went to an event, and I had my daughter, we were at a school event for the boys, and my daughter was there, and my daughter came up and she took the most massive chunk out of my leg, and this woman was sat next to me, and she burst out laughing, and we just bonded from then on because my daughter had bit me, and she got a little one as well, and it just became a lovely social sort of community. I mean, I must go back and remind the kitty about that, actually.
So level of understanding of where everybody's up to, yeah.
So again, thank you so much. I think Innoventures is probably you're a big group. You're probably not the most high profile. You don't shout about your successes. You're not out there telling everyone to come, but you're very welcoming. And I know you'll do a tour. Parents should do how many tours? A couple of tours of different nurseries, different fields.
Yeah, I think the first stage of choosing a nursery is always looking at where you live, because it has to be convenient to either where you live or where you work. And I would say that to any parent. And then followed by making sure it's a curriculum that you're happy with, and that, specifically when you're feeding into schools as well, making sure that works for you. And once you've covered those, then it really is a gut feeling. You go into the nursery, and sometimes it's a gut feeling you have about the manager, because you have to trust their leadership and have that kind of comfortable feeling with them. It might be a comfortable feeling you have just in a building with the entire team, but we would strongly say go and have a look around. If your child is a little bit older, bring them with you. That's really important, because then you can see how they interact with the classrooms and with the staff members. And then ask any questions you have, because so often people leave and they haven't asked the questions they want to ask. Don't be afraid to ask those questions, because those are important about putting your mind at rest and being comfortable.
And I think one of the problems is that when it's your first child, you have no idea about curriculum and about education, and you actually go and you do the tour, and you have no idea what you need to ask, and you go home, you think about it, and you go, oh, I wonder if they do. But as a first-time mum with a first-time child, really? I mean, what am I supposed to know?
Yeah, and no question is a silly question. We've all been there. And the chances are the questions you're asking, we will have been asked multiple times before, and they are really important to you. So you need to make sure you ask those things.
Thank you so much. A massive amount of information there. We're going to drop your contacts underneath.
Thank you.
If anyone's got any questions, I know she's just amazing. You can just ask her anything. So I'm not going to put her number there, because that would be really unfair, but do speak to the team and do go and tour the nurseries. As I say, I've been very impressed. Thank you, Lara.